Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to Tuesday Talks with Tonia. We have a lot of new faces, so I'm excited about that. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Tonia Gibbons, and Tuesday Talks with Tonia is a platform for women. We talk about different subjects, topics. We encourage, we empower, we uplift, we share, and we do it in our authentic selves without judgment, without shame, without fear. This is something that I've been doing for 5 years. So the podcast is the newer piece. It was an in-person kind of event gathering. We meet once every 2 weeks and we have a guest and we talk and we share and we laugh and do events and all of that good stuff. And a friend of mine who's actually in radio and television, and is a male, he saw Tuesday Talks, and I don't know where he saw it, but he was like, "Hey, you ever thought about doing a podcast?" And I was like, "No." He was like, "You need to." I was like, "Well, if you're going to manage it, I'll do it." And so that's how the podcast came to be. But I'm so glad that you guys are here. Welcome to Tuesday Talks with Tonia. Again, this is Tuesday, January 25th. So January is almost over. We're in the first month of a new year, and it's already flying by. It's already had some disappointing moments with the loss of a lot of people and just things going on. But I'm grateful that we're still here. You guys are here with me, joining me this evening. And so right now I want to introduce my guest, Ms. Vaughn Daniels. And Vaughn and I know each other from when she was working in the sheriff's office, but just around the community. I worked for the sheriff's office many, many years ago. And Vaughn and I have something else in common. I had a brother who was murdered in 2008, and Vaughn had a son who was murdered as well. And so we share that connection. And the reason for this conversation this evening is I watched, I don't know how many of you did, and if you haven't watched it, you can still go back and watch it, but it's called Women of the Movement. It was on ABC, and it was the story of Mamie Till Mobley and Emmett Till. And at first I was like, I'm not gonna watch it because it's gonna make me mad with white people. I'm gonna be angry all over again, thinking about, the tragedy that happened to Emmett, but also that happened to my brother. But the more I watched it, the more insight I think I received from it, the more I understood her as a mother, but also the power that we have as a people if we ever come together collectively. She sparked the movement, and that's really what the story was about. It showed her strength and her perseverance to make sure that her son's murder wasn't covered up, that she spoke out against what happened and she exposed a lot of people, but just her poise and her strength throughout. Now, she had her moments where she broke down, but it took me to another level when I talk about, it was necessary to watch. And so afterwards, the end of it, they did it, I think it was like 3 weeks in a row. And so when the last one played, I sat with it for a minute and I had a conversation with God, and it was like, you need to tell your story, because there are a lot of people that are in your shoes or have been in your shoes, and it's a story that needs to be told. But how do we do something about what's going on, what's taking place? And so, Vaughn, I'm gonna let you introduce yourself to the group, and then we'll just start into the discussion after you do, say your speech, talk about what you want to talk about. And Vaughn also created a group called Angel Hearts, and it's a support group, and it's for mothers of murdered children. So Vaughn, you have the floor. Go ahead and share what you'd like to share, and then we'll start. You're on mute, Vaughn.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Vaughn Daniels, and I lost my oldest son, in 2007 to a senseless murder, which all of them are. And during that time, I managed to go through a living hell, like most parents when they lose a child. It's something that's unspeakable at times. And during that process, I was talking to a woman that had lost. I was working at Doctor's Hospital at that time when 2007, and there was a lady there that had lost her daughter in a car accident. She was like 16 years old at the time, and so she understood what I was feeling of losing my son. So when I would have my so-called moments, that was the time that I would just break down and cry, and I would only do it for a minute because I didn't want to lose my self-control of everything. So. But when I would do that, they would always call her. Her name was Pam. They would always call Pam up to the floor and talk to me, and we would just talk, and she would calm me down, and because she related to what was happening to me. And then in 2012, I started campaigning for Sheriff Roundtree, and we talked about a support group. We started a support group. I said, I had tried one before, and it didn't work out. And he was like, well, if I win, you can get your own support group here with the sheriff's office. So I did. And I called it Angel Hearts. It's a support group for parents of murdered children. And it should be a very large group, but it's not that large because in the Black community, we always think that we can handle this, that it's okay, we got this. I don't need any help, and I don't need anyone to talk to. And I did the same thing, because when my son first got murdered, it was the same way. There was a support group somewhere off of Willow Road, I believe, some church, and they were sending me flyers, telling me to come, and I'm like, I don't need that. I'm not gonna go to that, and that's what I did. So when I got my own support group, I understood the reaction to people, and I do have a fair good amount of members there that come. They used to come on a regular basis, but because of COVID, we have been, just done at this point because I don't want to infect anyone. And right now, I'm taking care of my mom, which has cancer, and there's no, we don't interact with anyone, that much. So the support group itself was aimed just for people like us that have lost their loved ones, their children or a girl, to a murder, to a homicide. And when we did it, we were there and we were talking, and I would give information out because there's a lot of information that people need to know about when it comes to a homicide in Richmond County. A lot of people don't know they can get paid for that. Back in 2007, when the person got killed in Richmond County, they gave the family $3,000 to bury him with. Not a lot, but it was something. Now it's $6,000, and they need to know where to get the paperwork from, and how to go about the whole process of getting things done, the judicial system, and how law enforcement work the whole nine. So that's what I try to get them an insight on, to going to court, how to act at court and stuff like that. And right now, I think I know there's one woman now that lost her son that was in my group. She's going to court now. And then there is another one of my members. She just called me today and said she will be going to court she'll be going to court in next month, the 14th of next month. And usually what I would do would go to court with them to, just to have that, so they can have that support from the group. But now we can't. So, but Angel Hearts is still active. You can still call me if you need to talk to me. And I always have an ear for talking and listening to people, because I know how hard it is, and I know how difficult it is to try to go through, especially right now during the COVID, because you can't get with people that you really need to get with, to give you that support. So basically, the only thing you can do is talk, from a distance. But that's my little spiel on Angel Hearts.
Thank you, Vaughn. So while we are here, I do want to acknowledge Dr. Jackson, Dr. Tanjanika. She has a private practice. She's a mental health professional. And so, when I thought about this, I was like, I might need to have somebody in the mental health professional field join us on this call, because you just never know triggers, or you just never know how people are going to respond. So my sister's on the Zoom as well. So it's Stacy, but she's off camera. But she and I, in 2008, now mind you, I'm not from Augusta, but I've been in Augusta 22 years, almost 23 years. And when I was in before I started my journey. 2008, I'm working for Procter and Gamble. My mom was living in Arizona. My sister was in Colorado. My brother was in Oklahoma, which we were born in the Midwest. We all were born in Oklahoma, but we traveled. My mom was I told her she was a gypsy in a former life. But working, I think I was on second shift or third shift at Procter and Gamble. Hadn't been at work long, and normally I kept my phone on me, but for some reason this night I put my phone in my locker. And so I went to my locker during lunch, and I had like 5 missed calls from my mom, and I'm like, oh Lord, and you had to know my mom and know our relationship. So I was like, what this lady want? Like, here she go. I'm working. I don't have time for this. Well, I left, came back, and I saw them. I was like, let me call her and see what's going on. So I listened to her voicemail, and she was like, you need to call me ASP. And that aggravated me because I was like, it's not ASP, it's ASAP. I was being like, like she can't even say it right. Well, I listened to the message and I said, okay, let me call her and see what's going on. So she answered and she was like, where are you? I said, I'm at work. And she said, well, they found your brother. And I was like, what do you mean they found my brother? Found him where? Like, what are you doing? Like, my brother was the baby of the family. He was 27 when he was murdered in 2008. And she said, well, he's dead. And I was like, what do you mean he's dead? I don't even remember what happened after that. Because my brother, for everybody who knew us growing up, he was my baby. He was my first baby. I'm 9 years older than he is. And literally when he came home from the hospital, I had him 24/7. He slept in the bed with me. I lost him one night because the bed, the way it was made, I had him laying against the wall. Well, it was a crack and he was a little baby and I didn't know it. He fell through the crack and all I could hear was him crying. I just couldn't find him. I'm like, oh Lord, I done lost the baby. So he was literally my baby. And I just kind of blanked out. And then I just remember, so I work with 90% men. And I remember my radio going off and I couldn't answer because I was hyperventilating. I was like really about to pass out. And so one of the guys heard me and he was like, what's wrong? And I couldn't respond. So he sent 2 of my guy friends that are close to me and they found me on the floor, just a mess. It was storming that night. And they got me to a chair. They gave me a brown paper bag. Men, they don't know what to do and they don't like to see women crying. So they freaking out because I'm freaking out. So one of the friends that he got my cell phone and he was like, all I can say is my brother. So he picked up my phone. He called my husband, who's my ex-husband now at the time, and told him something was wrong, that he needed to come get me. His second call was to my pastor at the time, because he wasn't the mayor yet, which was Hardy Davis, and him and his wife, like when I tell you they made it there in 10 minutes, so they drove my car, but it was just in that moment of hearing they found your brother. And I'm like, what does that mean? But once the story unfolded, what we found out was my brother was hanging out with some friend of his. Now, mind you, this is Oklahoma. I'm here in Georgia. My mom's in Arizona. My sister's in Colorado. None of us are there. All we have to go by is the police report. And I talked to Vaughn the other day and I was like, to this day, I have not read the autopsy report. To this day, I haven't finished reading the police report. It's been 14 years. But the man that took my brother's life was a 50-some-year-old white man who had been in jail for 25 years, had only been out of jail for 2 months, came across my brother and his friend, and we don't know why, but my brother ended up in a field, an abandoned field. He was beat up, he was run over with a car. When I got to Kinsey and Walton and they saw the body, Miss Linda Ashley says, Tonia, y'all don't need to see the body. Like, you really don't. And I was like, okay, I trust you. But my mom, being a mother, that's her child. My mother was determined to see his body. She was like, I got to make sure that's my child. And Mamie Teal's story is so my mother. She didn't care what the body looked like. She went in there, and I was afraid. Mayor Davis's dad went in with my mom because he was like, we're not going to let her go by herself. And when he came out, he was white as a sheet. He was like, I ain't never seen nothing like that in my life. So to this day, I don't know what his body looked like. I don't want to know. I wanted to remember my brother as he was. You know, he always had a smile on his face. He was always kind of like a little goofy kid, and he was, you know, he was a good-hearted person. He loved people. He was always searching for friends, and I think that's probably why he ended up in that kind of situation. He was always looking for friends. You know, he felt abandoned by his dad. He was raised with a bunch of girls. It was me, him, my mom, and my sister. So, you know, he always was looking for friends and was always super friendly. And I used to worry about that for him. And we don't really have a motive. And I I cried, you know, did everything. But then after that initial shock, it was just like I went into go mode. It was like, okay, I got to figure out how to get his body here. I got to contact family. Like I literally lost 10 pounds in like 4 days. Like I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I just had to get stuff done. Um, and like Vaughn said, the city of Oklahoma, well, Lawton, Oklahoma, where it happened, the DA's office reached out and they said, okay, we're going to take this case to court. They found the man. I don't even remember how all of that happened. They called us and said, okay, we have the suspect. He's in custody. We're going to, you know, prosecute. Do you guys want the death penalty? So at first I thought I did. I talked to my sister. We talked to my mom, and we were like, no, you know, God will handle it. You know, I don't know where that strength came from, because normally I want to get you back, but it was something that wouldn't let me. And so I was like, no, we just don't want him to ever get out of jail again. And so they were like, okay. So the DA, every step of the way, he was like, are you guys coming to trial? I couldn't take it. I knew I didn't want to be in the courtroom having to rehear over and over all the stuff. And we said, no, we trust you to do your job. And we trust that you will get a guilty verdict and that this man will never walk the earth again. And so we didn't go. I got my brother's body flown back to Augusta. We did a service. And then the state contacted us and said, hey, we have money for victims of homicide. Just like Vaughn said, they have it in Oklahoma. And mind you, at the time my brother was 27, he had just started a job. Like literally, I had a call from him 2 weeks prior to that asking me to send him money. He was happy he got a job at Olive Garden and he needed some shoes. So I said, okay, and I sent him the shoes. But the week later, he called and said he wanted to come to Georgia. And I was like, well, I don't have the money to send for you right now. So I was talking to my husband, and he was like, well, he don't need to come and he need to be a man, you know. And he had lived with us before, but it was just something I was like, so behind my ex's back, I was trying to raise the money to get him. So one of the things that really hurt, I think, was in my mind, I'm like, okay, if I would have just had the money to get him here, he would still be living, but we don't know God's plan. And so I carried that guilt for a while, but I finally, you know, had to resolve within myself that, you know, God knew what he was doing. I wasn't at fault, but it was still a heavy burden. And so fast forward, you know, the man got convicted. He got life without the possibility of parole. And once we got that verdict, I kind of buried everything. So I never sought counseling. I thought about him on his birthday and on the date of his death, but never really let my mind process kind of what happened. And the story about Mamie Till Mobley, in the movie, she made a statement. She said, anything that happens to one of us had better be the business of all of us. And so when you think about hurt and harm and tragedy happening to us, especially at the hands of somebody like this man who, to this day, I can't even remember the man's name. That's how much I've kind of just buried it. But when she said that, it kind of struck me, and I'm like, okay, I get what she's saying. You know, a lot of times we see things happening in our community, we see things happening across the nation. We don't speak up, we don't say nothing, we don't do anything. We're like, well, it wasn't me, it's not my business. But when she said that, I'm like, okay, I got it. And that's how, when I look at how she, you know, the NAACP started reaching out to her, wanting her to tell her story, she helped them kind of organize and grow bigger than what they were. You know, she kind of brought in the masses once people saw what happened to Emmett. And I think about my mom. So Vaughn, like you, my mom had cancer. She found out December 2018, and she died April 2019. And the thing about my mom, she never let that pain go. She never let it, heal. And she carried that really to her grave. I to this day, I said the cancer came about because of the pain and the hurt and the, anger and everything that she carried. And she died literally, like, my brother's birthday is April 17th. My mom died April 16th. She was pronounced dead like at 11:40 something. And so my sister and I had made peace with it. We're in the hospital. She's, passed. She's sitting, laying in the bed, and we're looking. And I told my sister, I said, you know what? I said, Derek probably mad. That's my brother's name. Derek is mad at us because we let mom come up there and it's his birthday tomorrow. So we found, kind of joy in knowing that she was going to be reunited with him. And it still hurt, but it was just, we found the humor in it. And I think that's how I've been able to maintain for 14 years without, counseling, is because I think of the good times. I think of the happy times. I think of, what he would do now if he was around. I think of my godchildren and how my godson, who's 7, reminds me so much of my brother. Is uncanny. And I'm like, okay, God, is this kind of your way of saying, hey, he's good. You send me somebody that's like him. And he's so attached to me, just like my brother. Like, my brother would cry if I left. My godson does the same thing. My brother, when he was younger, couldn't pronounce my name, so he used to call me Sissy. And so I just think about how, if Mamie Till can do what she did and spark a movement, what more can we do when we're faced with these types of tragedy, which is the topic of discussion, is, how our tragedies changed our trajectory. And I talked to Vaughn, she might not have ever gone into the law enforcement had it not been for what happened with her son. And now me, with, I've worked in the mayor's office, I've worked for the sheriff's office, I've had all these positions, and I never quite understood how I landed there. But the more, I'm able to help people or come across people that have experienced some of the things that, I've experienced, that's my purpose, is to try to help people, to try to help them navigate. Like Vaughn said, there's help, there's resources, but how do you find them? And if I can help somebody, like I told Vaughn the other day, and it's I can't minister to a crackhead because I've never been on crack. I can't tell you what that addiction's like. I don't know. I can't tell you what an alcoholic should be doing because I'm not an alcoholic. What I can tell you is how to get over hurt and pain from a murdered loved one. What I can tell you is how to bounce back after divorce. What I can tell you is how to bounce back after you done had bad credit, your house, but I can talk about those things because I've been through them. And Vaughn, I don't know if that's kind of your experience, but I think about those things.
It is. It's definitely the same experience. As I was listening to you, I was thinking back, because for me it's been 15 years. Corey was murdered March 7, 2007, and so it's almost 15 years. And it was like, some days it's like yesterday. I guess I should explain to everyone what happened to him, like you did. Corey was 21 years old. He was on his way home. He was on his way to work, actually. Just left the house, got gas at the service station on Morgan Road and Deansbridge. It was a BP back then. He had stopped and got gas from there. There was 2 guys there. One was a dark-skinned guy. He was on the inside. He asked Corey for a ride. Corey told him no. And so when Corey went out to pump his gas, there was a light-skinned guy outside waiting. So he asked Corey for a ride. And this is only their version, because this is all we have. It's just their version. And this is what I got from court. And they said that Corey told him, that he would give the light-skinned guy a ride. I don't know whether he knew they were together or not. But during the court case, the light-skinned guy said that he could see on the dark-skinned guy's face that he was upset with Corey. So they got in the car. The dark-skinned one got in behind, and the light-skinned one rode in the front with Corey. He took him down to the Georgetown subdivision. Right now, there's a Dollar General there, and it's a little turnaround spot. Just at that turnaround spot, the one in the back seat, the dark-skinned one, shot him in the back of the head and killed him. And the car drifted off into a lady's house, and hit a bush, and she came out, and they ran. And the guys were from Waynesboro, and the killer ran to Walmart, and he got his uncle to pick him up and carry him back to Waynesboro. So it was probably about a month and a half, or 6 weeks before we found out, who it was that had killed him. And it was, then after then it was the trial. You had to wait for the trial. And back then trial wasn't that long as it is now. And we went to trial, and that was my first time actually seeing him. But like you, Tonia, we had to go see the DA, and they went, and it was then Danny Craig, and he was like, telling us about what he can do, what's going to happen, this and that. And I'm like, no, I don't want him dead. I want him gone off this earth. And my aunt was with me, and she was like, Vaughn, calm down. I was going off. And then, once I calmed down, and like you again, I thought about it. I said, you know what? Death is just too easy.
Yeah.
It's just too easy.
Yeah.
Sit behind bars for 30 years and think about it. Yeah. And so we ended up going to court, and he got 30 years. And people think that life is life. Mm-hmm. 25 years in Georgia is life. Mm-hmm. And before then it was 7 years, I believe. 7 or 14 was life, but now it's 25. And he had an extra 5 years for having a gun that killed him. So he has a total of 30 years. So he'll be coming out in 2036, I think. He'll probably never get out, honestly. He'll probably never get out. But that's his time frame. But it was horrific, because at that day that it happened, I had just came home from work, and the news was on. And that was really my first way of finding out the news was on. Okay. And there was a car, and Corey had just got this car. It was a 86 Cutlass. It was primed out, and he had just got it, gonna, do his thing with it. And I saw this car, and the news and media people were like, well, yeah, this is a drug-infested neighborhood in Georgetown, a man dead, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm looking at it, and I prayed for the family. I also just stopped and I prayed for the family, not knowing that I am the family, And then about 30 minutes or so, my ex-husband had just left, and the doorbell rang, and it was Roundtree, and well, he's a major chew now, and in the corner. And that's when my world changed. And I tell people, especially people in my group, when you lose someone, that's a new life. That was your old life. Now you're starting your new life. Yeah. Because everything has changed. What you knew before is now gone. So you have to start over again and try to figure out how to put the pieces back together and how to make it work for you. And it's hard. It's really hard, because sometimes you get insensitive people that just don't understand. And I don't know whether they're just ignorant to the fact, or they just dumb. I don't know which one it is, but you get people ask you crazy questions sometimes. Like, I had this girl ask me, how does it feel to lose a child? And I'm like, wow, really? And I tell people that, people are like, God, to beat her down. And I'm like, no, sometimes you just have to look at people and understand, where they're coming from and who you're talking to. Yeah. But when I looked at the Emmett Till story, I had heard about it in the 70s when I was a little kid. It was always on Jet, and I think it was like February, always, you see the picture all the time. And my question was, where's his father? And that was my only question. I knew there was a mom, but where's his father? And so I had to look at it. And people ask me, why you look at it? Why would you do that? That's because I had to know. That doesn't bother me. That doesn't bother me at all. I had to know what the real story was behind the whole thing. And now I know. And she was an awesome woman. She was awesome. When she saw that baby in there in the state he was in, at the Black Undertaker's establishment, and she didn't shed a tear. She walked in there and she walked out, and men couldn't take it. But she walked out and she said, I want everybody in the world to see what they did to my baby. And I'm like, wow, that lady was awesome. And so I was very impressed with the whole movie, and I understood it all, and through it all, like you could see, like your mom, the grieving process. You could see it. It's a lifetime. I tell people, you learn how to deal with it better, as time go on, but time does heal. But, inside sometimes, it still feels like the day of, anything can trigger it, anything, the sunlight, the smell, a look, we all have them, but I was really impressed with the whole story. And she was a great woman. She really was. And she did a great thing for the NAACP. She pushed them.
Mm-hmm. What I do research a lot, thinking about just her time in that movement. And you're right, you never heard about the father. And even like they still do today, when something like that happens, they try to find the negative of a family. And so what they did back then is they dug up that his father had been murdered in the military for supposedly raping a white woman or women. And they covered it up and buried it. And so all he had left was his ring, which is what she was able to identify Emmett with, because he had the ring on. But you hear how they disparaged his name, they disparaged Emmett's name, because they didn't want the truth to be known. But that's what they do. I think in some of the articles that were in the paper in Oklahoma, I think they said my brother had went to jail for something, and I don't know what it was minor, but they brought up that, and I'm like, he's the victim, he's dead. Why would you even bring any of that stuff up? What does it have to do with him being murdered, And we see that today. You look at what happened to Ahmaud Arbery, you look at what happened to George Floyd, and any of those that have been murdered, it's like they go on the defense, and they want to bring out all the negative, and they're the victims. And it's like, okay, what does any of that have to do with this person who is now no longer on this earth because another person decided that they didn't need to live? And when I think about Mamie Till, it's like, okay, she was determined. She didn't see justice the way she thought she was going to get justice, but justice is always going to be served, whether on this side of the earth or the other side, And that's one of the things that I think I hold on to, is that I know God is our avenger. If it wasn't for my faith, I probably would have been in Georgia Regional somewhere, because the whole event, it just transpired into something bigger than I could even imagine. So, it was just kind of a breaking point for me at the point of life that I was in. And when I looked up the word trajectory, the definition is the path followed by a projectile flying or an object moving under the action of given forces. So she was catapulted into being an activist, whether she wanted to be or not. She had to be an activist, an advocate for her son, because she knew what they were doing was wrong. They were trying to cover it up. They were trying to act like he didn't exist, all these things. And regardless of the restrictions from her time, because Blacks didn't have any rights, he was in Mississippi. That was one of the biggest racist states in the nation. And to think that she fought against all of that, and I think about us, even fighting to make sure that these people stay in jail, that they don't get out. But there's a flip side to that. So I was reading, I'm doing new, what are they called? It's the Bible app has these daily bread type things. And I'm doing one, and it was by Reverend Dr. Bernice King. And she was on there talking about, her father, and how, growing up without a father, she was robbed, and having a relationship. He didn't get to see her be married and all these other things. And they asked her the question, do you forgive the people who did this? And she said, I have to. She said, it's not a choice, you have to forgive. And Vaughn and I were talking about that. Vaughn said, you know what? I don't know if I forgive him or not. I don't even think about him. And that's, part of my thing as well. Like, I don't think, but I did have to forgive him, because I know I need to be forgiven. And it's hard. It's one of those things where I know I got to do it, God, like a stubborn child. You're going to make me clean my room. I don't want to do it. I'm going to do it with an attitude. So I know me, I'm that rebellious child. I know God is just like, this chick, I forgave it because you said I had to, but I don't like it. Like, that's just kind of my attitude. But Dr. King, she said, I have to forgive them. It's not an option. And she talks just about the whole journey for them. And towards the end of our conversation, I'll play just a clip of it. It's about 3 minutes long because it struck me. And I think about the NAACP. The work that they're supposed to do is to disrupt inequality, dismantle racism, and accelerate change in key areas, including criminal justice, healthcare, education, climate, the economy, and more. So when I read that, we were never approached by anyone from the NAACP in Oklahoma. We were never approached by any group. Now, mind you, it was 2008, but nobody ever came to us and said, hey, we need to go march on the steps of Oklahoma to make sure this doesn't happen. We never experienced that. And so I'm wondering, as a community as a whole, are we getting desensitized to things like this happening? Because, in the 50s, they took up arms, they got their own guns, they got their own money, they got their caravans, they fed each other, they made sure people had somewhere to stay. And I know we have the Black Lives Movement, but I don't really see the same kind of efforts that we saw back then. Now, what do you think, Vaughn?
I think you're totally correct. Totally correct. I was thinking the same thing. It seems like we are desensitized to Black on Black crime. It happens every day, and lately here it's been like every week or a couple times a week. When you look around since December, and it's just really to the point where it's like, oh well, just another one, and no one really cares. We don't march like we do for white on Black. Right. Right. We do not. We don't do it. And I can't understand that. My child, your brother, is just as important as anybody else. Why is it that we're not doing more? Why we're not going out marching and trying to stop, gun violence? And I don't know if gun violence can ever be stopped. I had this conversation yesterday with my sister and my mom and dad, and I'm not sure if it can ever be stopped. The gun laws are as they are, but they're not geared for Black people. They're geared for white people, because not a whole lot of us Black people are going to gun shows, are going to a pawn shop or a store that sells guns and getting them legally. Most of the guns are coming from around the way, the projects, back alleys. Easier, cheaper, more accessible. So the gun laws are not really they're not really for Black people, because, that's not how they're acquiring the guns. We're not actually going and paying $500 to $600 to buy a gun. We can buy one for $100 or $200 around the corner, So, I don't think there is a lot going on as far as Black on Black crime and, things that we could do to stop it. When I worked at the sheriff's office, the sheriff had a lot of initiatives. One was called, gosh, I forgot the name of it. It's on the tip of my tongue. But what we used to do would go out and we would just talk to people that were high risk of being murdered or incarcerated. And I was the moral voice for them. And I would talk and try to tell them my story, and hopefully would change their minds about, retaliation or just, doing something crazy altogether. We offered them jobs, education. If they didn't have a GED, we would do that for them. And anything else that we could give, clothes, anything that we could give, just to try to get them back on track, to make them a better person in society, to keep them out of a grave and out of a jail cell. That's what I was doing before I left there. And I missed that. It's called Giving Back. It was called the Giving Back Program Initiative. And it was a good initiative. But right now I don't know what they're doing with it. I'm not there, so I don't know what they're doing with it. But I think there should be another way of trying to handle gun violence for Blacks, for Black people, for African Americans, or whatever you want to call yourself. There should be some other way, because the other way is not working. We're not buying guns like that.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask Dr. Jackson if she wants to share something. I know she typed in the chat that forgiveness is for your peace of mind. It's hard in a lot of cases, but necessary. It's how you move from surviving the trauma to thriving in spite of it. And she also said, turn your pain into promise for the future. So that's what you're talking about, Vaughn, with you going back out through the sheriff's office to try to mitigate some of the things that could happen with our African-American community from a young person's perspective, or so those that are at high risk for traveling those roads that we really don't want them to travel. So turning your pain into a promise for the future. So not your child, but trying to save other people's children, trying to prevent other families from experiencing the pain and the tragedy that you've experienced. And so that's kind of the way to heal through, the pain and the turmoil that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. Dr. Jackson, are you available to?
Yes, ma'am, I am. How are you ladies doing?
Good. Thank you so much for joining.
Yes. Thank you all for sharing your powerful stories and testimonies. I do believe that, that's one of the things that people really need to hear, that feeling of loss, that feeling of, hurt, that I can't necessarily change this situation, but I have to look at it and say, how am I going to move forward? How am I going to change how I'm responding right now? It is okay to cry. It is okay to grieve. I know you both know this, as necessary as often, as you need to. Tonia, I know you know this a lot about me, but I wish I can tell you I woke up one day and said I want to be a mental health professional. No, my story grew out of pain, witnessing my mother, die at 14, and some of the trauma, the repeated trauma, that it doesn't make me immune as a counselor to having stressors, to having trauma. And so how do we respond to that? How do we get to a place where we can let go of the people who have victimized us by taking our children, too soon, by taking our siblings too soon? Because as long as we carry that anger, that rage, that hurt, we let their victimization live on through our actions. And so just what you all said, that's why it gets to a place where, you know what, forgiveness is necessary. And it's not for you, it's for me as an individual. Because if I match this energy, I realize that those things which are equal are the same. And so I don't want to radiate that. I want to take back what I've given, and send back compassion, send back love, send back forgiveness, because your energy is for you. It's for you to pick up, move on, be a wounded healer, Miss Vaughn. Continue to start your programs, because there are other moms out there who needs to hear this. That loss, it doesn't have to be your child or your sibling, but it could be secondary stress that someone is experiencing through watching others lose, family members or precious ones. And like you said, Ms. Vaughn, triggers awareness is necessary, because all of this recent violence and you seeing other parents losing their, children, it has the ability to re-traumatize you and put you back in that mindset. So it's important for you to apply those healthy coping skills and just recognize that. I salute you all, because trauma, that's the single most factor in any type of mental illness that is evident. So whether it's depression, schizophrenia, a lot of it, they have one thing in common: trauma. And what that trauma looks like is different, and how people respond to it is different. So,
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And you're right, seeing the violence recently, especially the one that most recent that really got to me, was the 8-year-old gunned down. And yeah, that just kind of took me back. And I'm like, I was upset with a white man for killing my brother, but I'm more upset with a Black person killing a child. Like, at what point do we stop valuing life? Like, this isn't a video game. This is not the movies. once a life is gone, it's gone. It's not coming back. And we have such lack and care and concern for lives these days, and it just angers me. And I'm like, okay, so NAACP in my mind should be doing something right now. It shouldn't just we shouldn't just wait till it's a white on black crime. Black on black crime is just as bad. It's just as wrong. It's just as traumatizing. It's just as ending as it is if it's a white person. So why do we not protest those that are doing wrong? Like, we're letting people, gangs, groups, whoever they are, overtake our cities, overtake our communities. And it's like, we're going to just sit by and let them do it. Like, so, but somebody has to stand up. Somebody has to be that voice. Somebody has to, be Mamie. Somebody has to lead the NAACP. And I don't hear much for our chapter here locally. Even when you look across the nation, it's typically the individuals that are doing more work, like your Ben Crumps and folks of that nature, but it's not necessarily the NAACP as a group as a whole, or National Action Network. Yeah, Al Sharpton will get up, but if it's a high profile case, but what about the cases that are local? They don't deserve the same attention and respect as anybody else. Like, so when I think about, legacy, when I think about, protecting our communities, like, what I feel a debt of responsibility for space on this earth. My debt is to make sure that I leave here and leave it better than the way I came and found it. So I'm always advocating, and I'm always going to advocate, but it can't be just one or two voices. It has to be voices in unison. I have on a shirt today. Well, it's a dress, it's a hoodie, but it says icon. And when I think about icon, when people leave this earth, Sidney Poitier, he was an icon. People like that, because they made a mark, but he was an activist. He was a social activist. He did things outside of just acting. He made sure that he gave back to his community. He made sure he was a voice for those that didn't have a voice. And so, Vaughn, that's what I think you have with your Angel Hearts. And that's what, I try to use my platform for as well. Like, okay, I have to amplify the voices that don't have somebody to talk for them, to, educate them, to give them an ear, to share my story, to share my testimony. I think about the Bible. There's a scripture said, we overcome by the word of our testimony. I never really understood what that scripture meant until it happened to my brother and until my mom died. We overcome by the word of our testimony. Listen, y'all, I've purposely put some tissue by my computer because I didn't know if I was going to be able to do this. Like I said, I haven't talked about this publicly since it happened 14 years ago, but I'm fine. Like, literally, I'm at peace. I'm thankful for God's grace, because I know that's exactly what it is. It's not me, myself. It is absolutely his grace. But I'm grateful that he has equipped me to be able to talk and share my story. Probably a couple of years ago, I wouldn't have been able to do it. But as time has gone on, and as I'm growing into learning about him more and how he's wanting to use me, I'm able to do this without shedding a tear. I'm sad. I miss my brother. I miss my mom. But at the end of the day, we all know we got a journey to take, and it's inevitable for us all. We just hate the way that they left. And so whatever I can do to kind of encourage somebody else, to help somebody else, to share my story, to help somebody get through those dark times, because there are dark times. There are times when I'm home by myself, or it's dark, or my mind won't shut off, and it's overwhelming some days. But for the most part, I'm like, okay, God, I got to get up and fight another day. I got to get up and speak for somebody another day. I have work to do. And I think that's what keeps me going. Dr. Jackson, yes, we'll make sure we put information about Angel Hearts in the chat. We have a lot of guests on, so welcome everybody. For those of you, this is your first time, welcome. I know I have a couple of friends on that have experienced something similar to me, and I don't know if anybody wants to share, but if anybody has any questions for me or Vaughn, or if anybody wants to share, just kind of raise your hand in the chat and we'll go in the order of that people have questions or comments. Or some people may not know how to raise their hand in the chat. So if you want to say something, just go ahead and take your phone off mute. And Stacy, go ahead.
Hi, I was thinking about what I call our T, or Dr. Jackson said, but it's true. My counselor said that what the mind forgets, the body remembers. So it is important to work through it. Sometimes it's physical, sometimes you got to walk it out or box it out or do whatever. Sometimes it's just crying it out, but you have to get it out. And I think, especially as Black people, we are always internalizing our struggle and our pain. Oh, God's got me, or, oh, I'm fine. I'm prayed up in the Lord, and that's great and good. But we need one another. We also need to use the tools that he's given us to heal. Like, I think about Jesus, he had his 3 and his 12. And I'm sorry, but I'm not Jesus. So I need backup. It's important for us to know that it's okay to not be okay. Especially as women, we're supermen and superwomen. We carry the weight of the world. But it's okay to be weak. Like, even Superman had to be saved sometimes. And so that's the only thing that I would encourage people to do, like with her network of helping others to deal with it. You can't force people to face their grief or go through grief or to even process grief, but you can encourage them to as often as you have to, so that they won't have, the after effects, because your mind will forget, but your body won't. And that's where you have a lot of issues. Like Dr. Jackson was saying, it's not just mental issues, physical issues as well, because unprocessed grief and stress wear your body down.
Thanks, Stacy. So that's my sister. So yeah, she's the one who does counseling. I'm the one who does it. So, but I'm good. I think Dr. Jackson was next, and then we'll go to Miss Turner, Miss Adrian. Dr. Jackson.
I was actually just throwing up my hands to Stacy because she's absolutely correct. If you don't remember anything, you cannot conquer what you don't confront. If you don't acknowledge it, there's no way for you to affirm yourself and affirm your power and move on. Those things that we put under the bus, it's going to stay there, but it's going to come out in other ways, spill over into other areas of our life, our health. Everything is connected. Kudos, Stacy. I like your therapist too.
All right, Miss Adrian. You're on mute.
I'm sorry, I'm older.
Okay.
But I want to applaud you ladies for sharing your story. And I also want to piggyback on what Dr. Jackson and what Stacy both said. I am a psychologist / counselor, and I believe in counseling because I myself have experienced trauma, as most psychologists do. But I didn't realize that I had buried my trauma. I really was convinced that I had dealt with it. And because as women, we always see ourselves as so strong. I realized that I was so strong that if I never hear the term strong Black woman again, it'll be too soon. Because what I thought I had dealt with, I had buried. And when it came back, I did not recognize it. Because I was like, what is this that is causing me to feel this way? And I realized that it was based on a trigger that triggered something I had truly forgotten because I had put it aside. I thought I had dealt with it. I thought I was good, And when it happened again, it was a trigger, and the trigger was too much because I hadn't dealt with it. So while I understand about faith, because I am an advocate for faith, I have loved the Lord since day one, and I know that He can't not only can but will do what only He is able to do. I do encourage people to seek counseling because it's the little things that you might miss. It's the relationships with the friends that you stop talking to. It may be the divorce. It may be, the fact that you're a helicopter mom. It's little things that show up that are signs that you haven't dealt with it. And it needs to be dealt with because the last thing you want is for it to send you into crisis mode. And that's how we hear these sad stories that we hear now about how people commit suicide. And you wonder, well, I didn't see any signs of it. They seemed just fine. Well, it came up one day. And it wasn't something that happened today. It was something that happened a long time ago, and that trigger just was too much. It was the straw. And it was a little tiny straw, but it broke the camel's back.
Right. Yep. Thank you so much, Adrian. You're so right. That's dead on. We bury stuff and we think it's dead and gone. And it's really not. It's there, especially when you don't deal with it, that you have to deal with things kind of head on. You kind of get over it and then, work your way into some kind of healing process for yourself. And so I think, especially women, we hear that all the time, oh, she a strong Black woman, but I don't want to be strong. Sometimes I just want to have a fit. I want to throw a temper tantrum. I want to throw crap. I want to cuss people out. I want to do all the stuff I'm not supposed to do. I get sick of being a strong person. I get tired of having to carry my weight and somebody else's weight. But I think just who I am and who I've always been the compassionate one. I've always been the one that want to make sure everybody else is okay. And that can come at a cost to your physical body, to your mental health. And so I'm learning, to kind of just deal with things as I see, I don't always have to be nice. I don't, I have to love you. I don't have to like you, so I'm coming to terms with things that I thought I had to do, not just as a woman, but as a Black woman, as a person of faith, because, I think people get it twisted that just because you're a Christian, you're weak and you got to let people treat you any kind of, no. The last time I read my Bible, when Jesus got mad at them at the temple, he turned over tables, he was tearing stuff up, like Peter was cussing, cutting people's ears off, and they were still his children. And so we have to find that kind of balance, what is the balance? No, I don't want to be on 10 all the time, but I also don't want to be a 0. You know what I'm saying? So where is that balance for us as women, as mothers, as sisters, as wives, as daughters, all the hats that we wear? Where's the balance? And I think, for a long time I was angry at God, to be honest, because I'm like, Lord, why would you allow this to happen to my brother? Why would you, allow him to leave this earth? He never had children. He was never married. All the things that he could have done and been, and, he's gone, but I had to figure out how to deal with that anger and how to kind of trust God in that season. It was tough. It was hard. I lost faith for a minute, but I think that it was one of the things that saved me, but it was also one of the things that was driving me crazy, because I'm like, what kind of God are you that you would, but then I have to think about Jesus, if he didn't save his own son from death, who are we? And so, but in that, he still had compassion. He was still merciful. He's still kind. He's still good. At the end of the day, he's still good, regardless of, what I felt or what I, dealt with or what I felt. Felicia said, we as people have been conditioned to be strong, Black, independent woman. However, that conditioning hurts so many of us. Where did this thought process come from? Still trying to figure out why. You and me both, Felicia. I don't know. I don't.
Tonia.
Yes.
I was just thinking, you said that you were angry. I was never angry with God. I was like, when I was told about what had happened to Corey, I was like, okay. The only thing I could think about was what my mom had told me and my sister when I was probably about 11 years old. And she used to love to read those Reader's Digest. That was her thing. Lay across the bed and read Reader's Digest every day. And one day she called us in the room and she said, I want to tell y'all something. She says, y'all don't belong to me and your dad. You belong to God. And one day God's going to take you back. And I'm like, okay, I'm a child. So I'm like, what the heck is she talking about? But when this happened to me with Corey, that was the only thing that I could think of, was God took back what belonged to him. And so I was okay with it, and I tell people all the time, we don't always get to choose how we leave this earth. Some of us may try to commit suicide, but that doesn't always work. You're in worse shape than you were before, you could be worse off, so we don't always get to choose how we're going to leave here, and so for me, I just came to acceptance like, okay, well, this is the way that God chose for Corey to leave here. But yet, like I was telling you the other day, it catapulted me to another area in my life, that I had no knowledge of. And when I talk to my people and I let them know, I tell them, this is the worst time of your life right here, right now. And you like another one of our members, she lost 2 children, or 3, but 2 to murder, and I always say right now is your worst. But if you have another child, you don't know, you don't know what God has for you on this other child. But I always think, that in the end of all this, I was, it took 5 years for me to get from being a devastated mother to being a campaign director all out the blue, which I knew nothing about. and God, boom, led me through it all, from there to executive assistant. And now I'm back home again, and I'm good with that, but I have the support group. I have friends. I used to do speaking engagements. I was on the news all the time, so it just catapulted me back out into the world, which I knew nothing about, honestly. I had been in Augusta since 1993. And I hardly ever went downtown. I hardly ever visit anything downtown. So I knew nothing about Augusta. I was just living here. But now, I see my world has changed, my new world, my new life, and this is it. And I thank you so much for having me, and giving me the platform also to be able to help someone, because right now there are a lot of people that's in Augusta right now that don't have a clue about what their next step is. They really don't. They don't know that they could get this, then they could go here and there to get the resources, what they're going to have to do when court time comes, what to expect. And so that's what I give them, in my group, is let them know, hey, look, I've been through it. I know what's going to happen and how things are going to work, and I'm just grateful and I'm just thankful for you for having me, in order to let people know exactly what's going on. And better ways to help, because my whole world has been helping people. When my grandmother was sick when I was 20 years old or so, me and my mom took care of her. Always been in the nursing field of taking care of people. So I'm used to it. And it's the only thing I know. I wouldn't know how to hurt anybody. Lord knows I have tried. My conscience won't let me. So I don't know anything about hurting people. All I can do is help. But,
And I'm like you. We come from a family that we've always been serving. Like my mom was as out there as she was. She always had a heart to serve. And so growing up, that's what we thought we were supposed to do. Somebody was always living in our home, sleeping on our couch, eating our food. We're like, we don't have enough food for us. How you gonna invite so-and-so from down the street? We don't have enough. What, they gonna eat ours? So, we grew up always giving back, always serving. And I'm like you, I don't know how to hurt people. All I know how to do is help. And if I don't know the answer, I will find it for you, which is, like you said, the tragedy forced me into positions that I didn't even know I could do. I didn't go to school to work for a mayor, a senator, a state representative. I didn't go to school to, I didn't even finish college. And I've been in jobs that required a college degree. But God was like, yeah, no, I need you over here. So I'm like, a lot of the stuff that I know how to do now, I'm like, Lord, are you sure? I don't know anything about this. I almost talked myself out of a job with Procter & Gamble. In the interview, they were like, this was the second interview. Okay, we're going to hire you. And I kept saying, well, you do know I don't have experience. You do, I know I've never worked. And so the guy said, are you trying to talk yourself out of the job? I said, I just want y'all to know, I don't know this stuff that you're talking about. But God had already prepared me. I just didn't know it. He opened doors that no man can claim they opened. He put me in places, people still scratching their head, like, how'd she get there? And I've had people ask people that they know about me or how did Tonia get that job? Or how did she do? Listen, don't ask me, ask God. Like, that's my response. And I get tickled when I hear stuff like that because, it's not like I woke up one day and said, oh, I want to be in politics, because trust me, I don't like politics at all. That is the furthest thing from what I like to do. However, God has a path for all of us. There's a purpose for all of us. And we don't know, or we may not understand the road or how we got there. But, when I look back and just look at the things that I've been able to overcome, I'm going to write a book one day, because when I tell just pieces of my story, people are like, what? That don't even match. I've been homeless. I've been jobless. I was married for 18 years to a serial cheater. Like, I have tons of stuff that I need to write down and just write a book. But it's each chapter of my life has made me stronger, even though I don't want to be strong sometimes, but it has made me wiser. But it's also given me compassion for others. It's also given me a heart to serve and help others so that they're not in the same positions or predicaments that I was in. And so, all things work together for the good of them that love God and are called according to his purpose. I hope I'm not offending anybody, but I am a woman of faith. And so I'm always talking about my faith, because it's truly what has got me over. Plenty of days I probably could have took myself out, but I'm scary, y'all. I ain't trying to kill myself. I'm trying to live as long as I can. I be telling God every night, okay, Lord, I need another 50 plus 1 year. So I'm 51 right now. That means about 102, I'll probably be ready, So that's how I talk to God. I'll be like, yeah, I ain't ready. So I know I couldn't kill myself, because I'm like, oh no, I got too much life to live. I'm trying to live to the end to see everything. I want to see everything and get everything he's got for me. But a lot of times the pressure becomes too much. And so somebody posted in the chat, the strong Black woman image also goes back to the days when we had to raise our own children and other people's children that we worked for, especially during slavery. However, healthy boundaries now should guide us into knowing that it's okay to be vulnerable. And somebody, Felicia said a great point, Dr. Jackson. Slavery has or had such a damaging impact on our culture that goes way beyond the physical. Absolutely, absolutely. Is there anyone else that wants to add, ask, share? Let me see who I see on that mic. Leandra, did you want to share? I know Leandra and I have similar stories as well. Or Shauna. Shauna sees a lot of that stuff. She works for the judicial system. Nobody? Everybody good? Wow. Ron, is there anything else you'd like to? Oh, Leandra, you coming on? Hey, girl.
Yeah. Hey, how are you all? I just want to say I appreciate you all being transparent and sharing your stories. Tragedy and pain like this is hard to sometimes talk about and share. And as Tonia mentioned, we do have similar stories. In 1992, my uncle, my uncle moved here to Augusta from DC to live with us. My mom, my uncle struggled with addiction. He was murdered. The person who murdered him took him to South Carolina across in Trenton, and he was found months after he was murdered and whatnot. And so very similar to Tonia, my uncle's name was Derek. And just the same type of situation by someone he trusted and thought was his friend. He was murdered. But because the person who killed him took the authorities to where they dropped the murder, where he threw the murder weapon into the water, he was not charged with murder. Instead, he was charged with voluntary manslaughter. And so that was over in Aiken County. They plea bargained with him. He was given 30 years. He served over half of it. He has been paroled. I'm not sure if he's still in the Augusta area or not, but just having to deal with that. And that was something, I was a teenager when that happened. It was definitely very traumatic for my mother and my grandmother at the time. And like Tonia, my mom kind of blamed herself for a while because of my uncle's addictions and things of that nature. She had told him he had to go. And so to her, had she not put him out, then it wouldn't have happened to him. But that's not true. The path my uncle was on, it was going, something was going to happen. But talking about it, it was one of those ordeals, like you said, when we saw it, actually, my aunt, so there was a story on the news. I know if you're not from here, you may not know, over in Aiken County, they have like a lot of strawberry patches, the peach fields, the muscadine fields, and that kind of thing. Some people were over there picking strawberries and discovered his body. And we saw the story was put on Aiken County that remains had been found. And 2 of my aunts showed up at my mom's house, at our house, that evening after the news. And it was like they knew. And so my aunt contacted Aiken County the next day, went over, told them the story of my uncle's disappearance and how it happened, and described what he was wearing the last time. And the investigators took a picture, I guess, of the remains and covered it up. And the belt buckle that, it was a special made belt buckle. And that was how my mom, until they, confirmed with dental records, but my mom had described that belt buckle to a T to the investigators, and they knew that it was him. And they showed my mom the belt buckle, and that's how we kind of identified him. We didn't have remains. We were not able to give him a proper burial. And so just listening to Tonia talk about how determined her mom was to see her brother, my grandmother, we had a brown paper bag of skeleton remains of bones. And Miss Renata at Williams Funeral Home had told them there was nothing to see. And my grandmother told her, those are bones of my bones and flesh of my flesh. And she examined each and every bone that was in that bag. And so there's a rule here, in Georgia, if you're going to have a service, no matter what the remains are, you do have to purchase a casket, either way it goes. But my grandmother placed each and every bone in that casket herself. And she did go through some counseling herself. My mom did not. And so years later, my daughter was actually, so that my uncle's death date was a really, hard time for everybody, but my daughter was actually born on the day that he was murdered. And so that kind of turned that date that would always be a sad, morbid day for my family into, we still celebrate him, but it kind of shifted the kind of focus from a negative into a positive. And my daughter has so many similarities to him too. She's left-handed like he is. He could draw. He was artistic. So does she. I encourage people that if you have experienced trauma, to talk about it, because bottling it up definitely will affect you in the long run. I can attest to that. And so I just thank you guys for sharing, and just keep praying for each other and lifting each other up. And Miss Vaughn, I was Corey's math teacher at Hepzibah High School.
No, for real? Oh my
yes,
God.
ma'am.
Oh, wow.
Yes, ma'am. His senior year, I was his math teacher at Hepzibah High School.
Oh my God, you look so young.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
God. Well, thank you. Thank you
yes,
so
ma'am.
much.
Big smile always. He was all the girls liked Corey.
Oh, yes.
Yes,
oh,
ma'am.
Yes.
All the girls liked Corey, and they loved to play in his hair.
Yes, he had that really fine hair. Yes, he did. Yes, and those dimples.
Yes,
That sounds
ma'am.
like my Derek too. Derek was the same way. Girls loved him. He had the dimples. They always wanted to play in his hair because it was so soft and curly. Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Thank you, Leandra, for
You know,
sharing.
I was gonna say, you know, the reason why also for Angel Hearts, my main reason um for initiating Angel Hearts was because of the fact that I wanted people to be able to talk about how they felt of not being, you know, judged by other people that didn't have a clue about how it, you know, how it is to lose a child. So I wanted them to have that option and that opening and that platform just to say, you know, look, I feel like this, and I, you know, because one thing about, like your mom, a lot of us, you know, we blame ourselves. You know, I blame myself, even though I was nowhere around, but I blame myself. And I had to come to terms with the fact that the reason why Corey picked these boys up is because he was doing what we had told him, my aunts, my dad, my mom, my sister, what we've always done, and that's help people. He was just helping someone. And instead of just saying, hey man, thank you, you know, they give him a bullet to the head. You know, and I blame myself for that, you know, because I know I've told him a million times, don't pick up strangers. It's the first thing you tell your child when you start driving, don't pick up strangers. Well, you know, some way or another, he thought that it was okay, and he was helping someone. Because I remember that night it was cold. It was cold that night. It was March the 7th. It was cold. And he thought he was giving somebody a ride, helping someone. So, you know, I had to get through that part of my life too, of saying, you know what, hey, he's doing what I taught him his whole life, and that is to help people. He did the right thing. Regardless of what happened, it was the right thing. They just did the wrong thing.
Right. That's right. They did the wrong thing. He did the right thing, and they did the wrong thing. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, I guess, that's kind of that, you know, reasoning and how you get to that place of peace and that place of, I'm not to blame. There's nothing I could have done, you know. Who's to say if I would have brought my brother from Oklahoma to here, maybe he wouldn't have made it. Maybe something would have happened. You know, I don't know. So I did have to come to the fact, you know what? You did the best you could by doing all you could for him while he was here. And that's all you can do. At the end of the day, it wasn't my responsibility, but it was God. Like you said, he didn't belong to any of us. He belonged to God. And so my brother also, he was a diabetic. He was the worst case diabetic. My brother had died like dozens of times by the time he was 27 in a hospital, on the way to the hospital, and he's always come back. And so for this to, you know, take him out, you know, I kind of look at it like, okay, he was completely healed now. He didn't have to take 3 shots a day. He didn't have to. I got a call when he was living in Texas. He was working for Target, and they found him passed out in a parking lot. He was working, pushing buggies. He passed out in a parking lot. Nobody knew why or anything. And all they did was picked up his phone. And luckily he had talked to me, like, I guess I was the last person he talked to. So they called my phone and they were like, oh, we got this young man. He's passed out in a parking lot. And I'm like, I'm in Georgia, you know, but the many times that he's come back from death, and then for that to be the way that his life ended, it just, you know, it was something I had to reconcile myself with. But, you know, I'm grateful yet for the 27 years that I did have. I'm grateful for, you know, the life lessons he taught me. I'm grateful for him looking up to me and, you know, him loving me the way that he did. And so, you know, I'm grateful for the good things and grateful for the life lessons even after his death. Like, it's still a lesson for me. It's still something I'm learning to navigate through. It's still something I'm able to share and help somebody else with. So I'm grateful regardless.
Yep. The day that Corey died, the first thing I did was, when they told me, was I just thank God for those 21 years he gave them to me. That was the only thing I could do, was thank God. I'm like, hey, God, I thank you. I had it for 21. A lot of people don't get that. I had it for 21.
Yeah. Absolutely. Is there anybody else want to share? This has been a very, very good Tuesday Talks. It's very deep. It's very intentional. And I hope that it's helpful to you guys. You guys absolutely make sure you reach out to Ms. Vaughn, Angel Heart. I did share the email address and the phone number in the chat so that you guys can connect and contact. Shauna was on earlier, but she's actually still working. But she did message me, Ms. Vaughn, and says she's in dire need of your services. She works through, she's at the court, victim services.
Okay.
She says she have trials just about every week, and the majority of them are murder. So she said to tell you thank you for tonight, and that she really wants to connect with you. So I'm going to send her your information as well.
Yeah, I'll be more than happy. More than happy. Great. Outstanding.
Well, ladies, I really, truly have enjoyed my time. It's been healing. This is therapy for me, even though I don't do therapy. This has been therapy. I see Leah just said the same thing. She said this was a whole therapy session in itself. And what I will do, so I will post some resources, because like Vaughn said, there are resources available that people just don't know about. And a lot of times, we lack because we don't ask. And so I researched again, and I found some resources. So I'll make sure, let me show you guys this video real quick. Let me share my screen. So yeah, it's Reverend Bernice King, and she's talking about forgiveness. And she's talking about how, again, what we were just talking about, they grew up in a household of service. Her mom teaching them to serve, and her dad being on the front lines and serving and, risking his life. But she taught that forgiveness piece. She said she struggled. She was like, okay, God, quit talking to me. I don't want to hear nothing about forgiveness. She said that was her attitude when it came to reconciling about her dad being murdered. And so it really, really spoke volumes to me. So if you guys can snap it off of there and watch it later, that really helped me. And it really, brought me to a place of, okay, God, it's not just me, and of course we already know it's not just us. We're not the only ones, but sometimes it's helpful to hear others that have been through similar. So that's why your group is so important, Vaughn, to have that outlet, to have that platform where people who really have compassion and understand, because they've been in your shoes. A lot of times you don't know what to say to people. You don't know how to help people or minister to people if you haven't been in their shoes. And so, that was one thing that helped me. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for giving back, even in the midst of something that was so painful, you still found it in your heart to give back. So that's to be commended. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for all things. You are awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, ladies, it's 8:00. I don't want to belabor you. I want to thank you guys for thinking it not robbery to come and sit and chat with us and hear our stories. And hopefully it's giving you some hope. Hopefully it's giving you, information that you didn't have, so that when you run across somebody like us, you'll know how to help, or you'll know how to send them my way or send them Vaughn's way. But that's what it's all about. That's what Tuesday Talks, again, is a platform for women, where we share, we encourage, we empower, we inspire, we uplift. And we offer a platform where people can come and just be who they are without fear of, somebody talking about them or somebody judging them. Just be who you are and trust that, we're here to help and not hurt. So I appreciate you guys so much. You can follow Tuesday Talks with Tonia on YouTube. What I'll do, once this gets uploaded, I'll send it to Vaughn and you can share it. People can go and like the page, and that way they'll be able to watch all of the prior ones and the ones to come. We're also on Facebook. I don't do Instagram that much, but I do have a page. It's just I don't do it that much. So thank you, ladies. I appreciate it. Appreciate your time. You guys continue to stay safe. Continue to pray for one another, and y'all have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank all y'all.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.